The seam under the skin. There's a hush in a tailor's shop that you can't buy. It comes from wool that has learned patience, from linen waiting to wrinkle in the right places, from chalk that believes in promises. In the morning, I unlock the door, set the iron to breathe its white ghosts, and run my palm along the grain of a bolt of navy flannel like I'm greeting a living thing. My shears hang from a hook over the pressing table. I touch them the way a violinist touches a bow, before thought, before superstition. The room smells of steam and cedar blocks. The mannequins keep their quiet opinions. My name is Anton. I cut suits for people who have decided to be seen. When I measure, I don't only count. I listen to how a rib cage wants to expand. I watch a shoulder decide what kind of story it will carry. I know where a man has taught himself to be smaller, and I let the cloth argue for him when he won't. My fingers are strong the way a whispered rule is strong. I loved Eva because she walked into every doorway like she was calibrating light. Gallery owner, soft voice, sharp wrists, a mouth that could make no sound at all and still give orders. She came to me first for a tuxedo that would ruin the confidence of anyone who stood next to her. We picked a black with the restraint of a dangerous thought, satin very nearly matte, lapels that turned like small rivers. She watched my hands draw a line across her shoulder with chalk and smiled like I had told her a secret. By the time I slipped the basted jacket over her arms at the first fitting, we were already unfinished in ways that flattered us. Those early weeks tasted of espresso and paper cups at midnight and the breath you hold while waiting for a hem to admit it's right. We'd tumble against the pressing table when the shop door locked, fabric bundles like city blocks around us, the iron hissing in disapproval, and then in blessing. She learned how to unhook my tape from my neck with her teeth. I learned that a finger pressed 2 inches below her collarbone made sentences unnecessary. We said very few big things. We had small truth and a lot of precise silence. The first discrepancy wasn't loud. It was an unfamiliar note in her perfume, fig under the narrowly. Eva wore clean scents that did not apologize. Fig arrived late and stayed. Then there was a cufflink, gold, square, engraved with a single initial that pretended to be modest. I found it near the cutting table under a drift of selvage, as if it had attempted the decency of hiding. She laughed when I held it up. "Patrons shed," she said, and kissed the inside of my wrist in a way that unstitched questions. They didn't unspool so easily. I began to move things in half millimeters, my own private surveillance. The thimble on the third peg instead of the second. The tailor's chalk rotated 90 degrees. The shears, tips a finger width from the edge of the felt mat. You learn to notice what your hands have learned to do without you. The next day, the thimble had returned to its peg like a homing bird. The chalk lay in its habitual position. Someone's muscle memory had disagreed with mine. The shears had shifted a breath, as if a courteous stranger had set them down gently enough not to wake a sleeping thing. Eva chose not to lie elegantly, a kindness I was not sure how to accept. "Don't you think," she said one night on my floor with her blouse unbuttoned to an argument, "that desire is not a lake you own, but a river that wants to be let through?" She propped herself on one elbow. Her spine was a line my chalk would have loved to outline. "We should write rules, not build a dam that will break later when the village is asleep." "Rules," I repeated, watching steam lift from the iron left warm, as if even it leaned in to listen. "No one from your staff or mine," she said. "No strangers in our bed. We tell each other before, not after. We keep what's ours clean. We do not humiliate." She caught my jaw with her knuckles. "And we keep the work holy." It's a strange thing to sign a treaty in a room where everything is about repair. I said yes, because I was proud, and because I was afraid, and because a man who makes suits learns to respect the body's insistence on motion. We sealed it with my mouth on her sternum. I thought I could measure a river. The day I met Iris, heat had pooled in the street as if the sun were a lazy cook. She stepped into my shop with a posture like a verdict, dancer, choreographer, muscles thin as the edge of a blade, hair scraped back without apology. "I need a suit that makes my body into a sentence," she said, touching the lapel of a mannequin with 2 fingers. "I need to say a thing my mouth doesn't have teeth for." "I can make you a grammar," I told her, and picked a gray that didn't pretend to be shy. She smiled with half her face. Her shoulders relaxed by a width of breath that only someone who measures notices. Measuring a dancer is like translating a poem with your hands. I circled her with my tape, a cartographer in love with borders. "Breathe in," I said, and she did. "Out," and her ribs became a staircase I wanted to climb with care. My thumb found the notch above her hip where fabric wants to do what it wants. She smelled of citrus and rehearsed sweat, not the kind that has to do with failure but the kind that has learned the right temperature of effort. When I wrapped the tape around her chest and it limbed her, she looked down at my hands and then at my mouth and then back up. The room leaned in. We didn't arrange rules. We arranged cloth. We arranged ourselves into a distance that was not going to be adequate for long. She came for the first fitting and stood before the mirror blown out with pins. The unlined jacket held her at the shoulder with the tenderness of scaffolding. "You have hands like a winter," she said, "exact and quiet." "You have a back that deserves nicer language than I have," I said, and she laughed from somewhere below her navel. I pushed the button of the iron. Steam rose like an exhalation you can see. When my knuckle grazed her spine as I marked center, she didn't move away. "Myra, no, Iris," came again the day a donor took Eva to lunch with the kind of hunger you only acquire after practicing on coyotes. I knew because the fig was on Eva's wrist when she came to my shop door afterward, her smile brittle, her mouth wanting to be kissed as if it would break otherwise. She put her hands under my shirt and drew me toward the back room where nobody goes unless they have earned the right to watch. I let her. I let her because I loved her and because I had said yes to a river and because my body learns too quickly. We took each other like we were both trying to keep a roof together in a storm. When it was done, she lay panting and radiantly annoyed. "You're thinking," she said. "Don't you dare." "I'm thinking about hem allowances," I lied. She pushed my face away and sat up, the blade of her shoulder shining with sweat. "We've made rules," she said, as if that solved the moral algebra. "We're better than hurt people. If my shop has a heaven, it is the hum of the sewing machine when the needle finds its rhythm over multiple layers, 4 parts canvas, stay tape, like a small train deciding the mountain is negotiable. Each pass ties the thing to itself. The day I set Iris's shoulder, I felt something in me accept a decision that had been making like dough at the edges. I told Eva in the gallery's back room. She glanced at the door before meeting my eyes. "Before," she said quietly, as if respecting the letter of our contract hurt worse than the content. "You said it before." "I told you before my mouth did anything," I said. She nodded, borrowing steel from the sculptures in the corner. "I'm seeing someone," she said, and gave a small, efficient nod toward the room. "Claimant, the man with the cranes. He thinks heavy things are his friends." "I found his cufflink," I said. "Then you found out honestly," she replied, and there was a slice of humor between us I wished I could sew into a pillow and sleep on. The gala for her new show kissed my calendar like a threat. I finished Iris's suit that afternoon, stitched the last pick along the lapel like addressing a letter to a country my hand had never visited. I took the jacket off the stand and held it to the light. The gray told a story it had been told to tell. The inner seams lay tidy like secrets that wouldn't embarrass you later. When Iris put it on, the cloth stopped being cloth and started being her decision. I stood behind her and adjusted the collar, my fingers under fabric barely, but the mirror acknowledging us both. Our eyes met in the glass like conspirators with excellent manners. At the gala, the gallery smelled of money pretending to be citrus. The donors arrived with the sort of jewelry that requires rehearsals. I wore a suit whose hand I knew better than my face. Eva floated. I watched her touch elbows, kiss air, steer conversation like a gondolier. Clement showed up late with that particular weather systems of men who are certain machines love them. He shook my hand as if he had discovered it. His cologne wanted to win an election. He put his palm on the small of Eva's back and left it there like a signature. She looked at me long enough to write a paragraph and looked away. Iris entered without ceremony, which is to say she did not bring with her the noise called attention. The room bent toward her anyway. In the suit, she was a sentence you groove your thumb over to feel the indentation. She saw me. She came to me. "You're here," she said, as if I had done something more difficult than arrive. "Try the pocket," I said. She slid her hand in, laughed when her fingers met the secret coin I sew into every jacket, an old superstition of tailors who think luck is a stitch. "You spoil me," she murmured. Clement joined Eva at the sculpture shaped like a story about restraint. He thanked me for the tuxedo I'd made him. "You've given me a new spine," he said. I knew mine was subpar. I smiled with my teeth. I did not make a spectacle. Revenge has terrible taste. Instead, I let the evening spend itself. I stood under a painting that refused to behave and talked to Iris about the seam where sleeve meets armhole, that little region of engineering that can make or unmake a man's day. I let my hand brush hers and then stay. We left without lying to anyone about why. In my shop, the iron sleeps on its side like a dog. I didn't turn on the overhead light. The street light made it square on the floorboards, and we stepped inside it because it felt like permission. Iris didn't need explanations. She undid my top button with her knuckle, a small act that felt like opening a letter from yourself. I slipped the jacket off her shoulders with the reverence of a priest disrobing a saint, then laughed at my own melodrama when she swatted me and said, "It's cloth. Don't make it faith." I kissed her with the patience my hands use when easing canvas into place. The world went down to the size of my mouth, the heat along her throat, the living line of her back. She tasted like an orange someone had rolled on a table before peeling, the pith bitter in the best way. She kissed like a decision that didn't apologize. I braced her against the pressing table, and she pulled me closer with her calves like a cruel and holy instruction. I will not write our bodies like a manual. I'll say only that when she put her palm on the left side of my chest and I pushed and kept pushing, something that had been stitched too tight inside me gave, and the cloth didn't rip. It made a new seam where both of us could breathe. After, sweat cooled to the temperature of confession. We lay on the floor between bolts of fabric and watched the ceiling fan pretend to lower the air a degree. Iris traced the white line on my middle finger where a needle had won a year ago. "You carry your work in your skin," she said. "So do you," I said, and slid my thumb along the callus under her big toe, that hard coin of balance dancers grow like proof of existence. She laughed high and quiet. It vibrated in my teeth. Eva texted at dawn. "We should divide the art," she wrote, as if we could autopsy a life with a spreadsheet. I asked her to come to the shop before I opened. She did, hair pinned the way a solution is pinned. We sat near the mannequins that had worn our private theater. "I won't slander us," she said. "We were magnificent sometimes." "We were exact," I said, "and brave. We chose without cruelty." She took the lithographs that had taught me to look longer. I kept the chair that had learned our weight. She left with a suit bag I had made for her a lifetime ago. She smiled at my hands as if to bless them like relics. "Be good," she said, then corrected herself. "Be honest." Iris didn't move in. She brought instead a toothbrush that leaned against mine like parallel stitches, and a plant that did not die under my inattention. She worked in studios that smelled of dust and bodies, and at night sometimes she'd sit cross-legged on my cutting table and read while I pressed seams flat into obedience. Sometimes she'd slide down, put her palms on my hips, and take from me what she needed without injuring the work. We didn't write rules. We behaved like people who trust their hands. A kid wandered in one afternoon with a suit his mother had bought for a job he wanted. It gaped at the chest and sulked at the sleeve. He looked at himself in the mirror the way a deer looks at a road. "I can't afford bespoke," he said. "You can afford 10 minutes of being seen," I said, pinning without digging. I tightened the waist, taught the shoulder where to live, whispered with my needle. When he stood again, he looked as if his bones had received mail. "How much?" he asked. "Tell someone I exist when they ask you why you look like a promise," I said. He grinned and shook my hand like I had lent him a backbone. "If you pass my window late, you'll see the ghost of steam and my shadow stitching. I turn off the lights in an order the room prefers. Back table, front lamps, then the small bulb above the mannequin that hates the dark. I lock the door and stand a moment with the key warm in my palm. Sometimes Iris's step finds mine. Sometimes it's my own breath that keeps me company to the corner. If I put my ear to the shop's door after locking it, I hear wool settling and the whisper that cloth makes when it forgives a day. Everything we wear touches the body we've earned. Everything we love stains a cuff or sweetens a collar. I have my failings folded and stacked. I have my better instincts on hangers that don't leave marks. I don't think I'm wiser than I was when I signed rules with the hunger of a younger man. I do think I'm kinder. When my hands lie now, they do it to flatter, not to hurt. And when I press a seam open and feel heat rise and fade, I remember that the strongest lines in a life are not the ones we cut to size. They're the quiet stitches underneath, holding, even when the fabric changes its mind.